I've wanted to create some videos, but time escaped from me between the book and I was on a client deadline. And yes, everything was delivered successfully, which was awesome. But there was a discussion that came up that I wanted to share with you about designing something that's familiar for a user rather than creating something intuitive. So my favorite UX designer, Jef Raskin, coined this idea long ago. He didn't believe there was such a thing as an intuitive interface. Interfaces that seemed intuitive were actually familiar metaphors or approaches, and that's why users had an easy time adopting and using them. So as an example, Raskin did a usability test somewhere in Northern Europe, either Sweden, Norway, Finland, somewhere there. Anyway, he incorporated a mouse in his study, and in the US at the time, that was a common tool to use with the computer. We all knew how to use it. But there it wasn't common. The participant had no idea what it was or how to use it because it wasn't familiar to her. Another example of familiar, and my favorite, comes from my uncle, who said what he found to be drastically different in Germany versus the US was latches versus doorknobs. And I thought he was weird, until a German friend of mine shared a story of when she was a 17-year-old exchange student newly in the US. And right after she landed and went to her host family's home, she wanted to take a bath. She went into the bathroom and was confused by the doorknob. She couldn't figure out how to lock it successfully. So needless to say, that was not a very relaxing bath. So now for good measure, let's consider the light switch. We only know how to use a light switch based on watching adults use them since we were babies. We consider a light switch to be intuitive, but is it? Anyway, Raskin wrote an essay about the idea of the familiar versus the intuitive and included the thought that innovation doesn't happen through the familiar. You need to create something completely new that people need to learn how to use. So discovery has to be easy, and there needs to be some type of familiarity to the concepts and metaphors. To him, breakthrough innovation was very uncomfortable. So as I was working on this new project, this idea felt fitting to discuss with the team. We were creating a new approach for a traditional industry. So we can help people adopt and use it, we needed to incorporate some metaphors that users would find familiar. We had a lot of discussion about how people think about different metaphors and what they find useful. Awesome discussion. But as we were talking, we realized one thing that we can't forget during this process is that sometimes existing approaches and products today, they can become familiar too. So familiar that we believe falsely that they're the only solution. So if we look at the travel industry, years ago it was a huge innovation to present outgoing and returning flights in a single card at once, partly because the back-end system was built for people to choose an outgoing and then a returning flight. Seeing all items at once priced together was a new idea and a lot of work to implement. And there were other stories too that get you to wonder if systems are truly user-centric or made user-centric because of these technical limitations. Look at Prezi versus PowerPoint. We're all comfortable with PowerPoint because it is a Microsoft product. So if you know how to use Word and Excel, you know PowerPoint. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best tool. Prezi is far more engaging, but also Prezi is very unfamiliar, which makes it hard to use. The irony of considering this is that users would never know if there was a better way to address an issue. They don't know what's possible and sometimes can't identify their own problems. A favorite quote of mine by Steve Jobs: "Some people say give the customers what they want, but that's not my approach. Our job is to figure out what they're going to want before they do." I think Henry Ford once said, "If I'd asked customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse." People don't know what they want until you show it to them. That's why I never rely on market research. Our task is to read things that are not yet on the page. So when you're working on a new product experience, ask yourself and your team 3 questions if a new approach isn't sitting well with everyone. Are you not liking the approach because it's unfamiliar? Does it use a metaphor that doesn't make sense for this audience? Do you think there is truly a better way to address the design challenge? And at that point, discuss what the design challenge really is and brainstorm options. But be sure to keep your design handy, because you may be going back to it because, well, it truly solved the design problem being presented. All right, hope this was helpful. Thanks. Enjoy your week and more to come.